Ayo, I think we can all agree that achieving GOAT status or even being a part of the GOAT conversation in the sport is probably one of the biggest accomplishments you can get as an athlete. And while the UFC has its fair share of GOATs within that conversation already, like Jon Jones, Demetrius Johnson, GSP, and Anderson Silva, and there are also being GOAT conversations for each individual division, let's look into the future at our current UFC champions and predict which one will end up being a part of those different GOAT conversations in the future. When it comes to champions that haven't defended their belt yet, like Merab and Belal, between the two, I think it really depends on how they perform in the next few fights. If Belal is able to beat Shavkat and Merab is able to beat Umar, and they both get a few more title defenses in, then I think that there could be a conversation for both of them in their respective weight classes. The only thing that I think would be stopping them from being a part of those different conversations is the fact that they both barely aim for finishes, and the fact that they both are primarily wrestlers. And from what I've seen, most MMA fans hate fighters that choose to grapple and hold their opponent down for the entire fight. So they're both pretty much cooked regardless of if they win or lose their next few fights, unless they start adding submissions and finishes to their arsenal of moves. With Pantoja, it's already clear as day that he's the second GOAT of the flyweight division, and some could even go as far as saying that he's overtaken Demetrius Johnson and became the GOAT of the flyweight division. As I've been saying for a while now, it's time we have that talk about Pantoja. He literally has nothing else to prove, and the only thing he's missing is the star power that should come from doing what he's done in the UFC. But yeah, he remains the only champion that no one really talks about. After beating both of what many will say are the best featherweights of all time within the span of 8 months, Ilia Topuria is definitely at the point of his career where if he decides to stay at featherweight and continue to defend his belt, he'll be up there with Jose Aldo, Volkanovski, and Max Holloway as the best featherweights of all time. But I do feel like if he does end up vacating the belt and moves up to the lightweight division, he's most likely going to end up beating Dustin Poirier and Charles Oliveira. But when it comes to fighting Islam, I do think that Islam is going to end up beating him, and it'll end up being one of those things where we can only imagine how great Ilia would have been if he had stayed at featherweight instead of moving up. But if Ilia does end up moving up and manages to beat Islam, then put that man in the fucking GOAT conversation right now. If I'm being fully honest with you guys, Islam could probably be a part of those GOAT conversations right now. The only argument that I could probably make against it is the fact that out of his 3 title defenses, 2 of them were against Alexander Volkanovski. And in the first fight, a lot of people thought that he lost because of how close the fight was. But if Islam does end up beating Arman next week and moves up to the welterweight and becomes double champion and defends the belt there, then there's absolutely no doubt he'll be up there as one of the greatest fighters of all time. And if he doesn't move up, he'll still end up being regarded as the greatest lightweight of all time. With Dricus du Plessis, I feel like he has a pretty good chance of holding onto the belt for a while, but I also feel like he won't be able to beat some of the records that the last middleweight greats like Anderson Silva or Israel Adesanya set before they lost the belt. But I honestly think that with Dricus, it honestly depends on how he does in his rematch against Strickland next month and how he does against someone like Hamza when they eventually fight. And if he manages to get past the both of them, then I don't really see anyone else at middleweight giving Dricus as much as a challenge as both of those fighters would. And I could honestly see him being a part of some people's middleweight GOAT conversations. When it comes to Alex Pereira, I've seen hella fans online say that he should be a part of the GOAT conversation right now. And while I think that he'll be a part of that conversation eventually, right now is definitely not the time to have that talk. These past 2 years have been incredible for Alex Pereira, and the amount of stuff that he managed to do within that time is insane. But I also feel like before we start putting Alex in the GOAT conversation, he still needs to defend his belt just a bit more, and we still need to see how good his wrestling and ground game is against fighters that are primarily wrestlers. Because who knows, maybe a wrestler is all it takes to dethrone Pereira. But with him recently practicing his ground game, I do see him surprising a lot of people, myself included, with his improvements on the ground compared to the last time he fought a grappler. With Tom Aspinall, it's pretty obvious that if he's able to beat John, he'll definitely be the greatest heavyweight of all time. But I feel like in order for Tom to get that greatest fighter of all time title, he has to at least clear out and dominate his division for a good few years like John did at light heavyweight, up until he fought Reyes. Because personally, I don't think that it makes sense to immediately give Tom the GOAT title if he beats John. If he finishes him in the first round, then fuck it, give him the GOAT title right fucking now. But I feel like he will still need to dominate the heavyweight division for a few more years before we start putting him in that conversation. And while I do think that each fighter will be greatest champion this year, Islam, Pantoja, Pereira, and Ilia are the only fighters that I think are most likely guaranteed to be a part of most fans' GOAT list due to the amount of stuff that they've managed to do and achieve as champion. But what do y'all think? Who out of our current UFC champion roster has the highest potential of being a part of the GOAT conversation in the future? And please, make sure to like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.